The Blast Spring Finals in London are done. That is the end of the season. And I was there, and I saw some of you guys. I was there working the desk. I was there on the finals day. Really cool to meet some of you guys. Honestly, such a great weekend. I thoroughly enjoyed it so much. But I don't even get a chance to talk about it, okay? I was at home relaxing for a little bit, and already Roster Mania has begun. And it starts with Liquid. Okay, a little Linkin Park interpolation for you there. Not sure why I've done that, but I've done that now, and we're going to move swiftly on from it. It starts with Liquid. It is Liquid benching cadiaN after a 7-month stint on the lineup, and quite an early move to be announcing, and I think the ones that are getting announced now are, in general, the ones that behind the scenes people were already talking about. Not even behind the scenes, honestly. People were talking about stuff like this potentially happening on podcasts already. So this hasn't come out of the blue, but still sad to see because cadiaN's style in CSGO, I think, would have transitioned perfectly into CS2. He loved playing active. He wanted all his players on the team to play active, to go aggressive a lot of the time as a unit. And sadly, it has not worked on Liquid. There's also more rumors coming out. Now, this is worth looking into because Richard Lewis, generally very reliable, but he has said he hasn't vetted any of this. It's just come from a source he's used in the past. So none of this is anywhere near confirmed. Take it all with a grain of salt. Richard Lewis said he thinks Zeus is probably out of Liquid. FaZe and Vitality have already inquired about Twistzz, but Twistzz is potentially going to be the new IGL of Liquid. He's probably going to stay. Now, even this quote is maybe a little misleading because I watched the stream and he was more saying that Twistzz is being considered as IGL for Liquid, but that is by no means confirmed yet, which I think is a good thing. I think they should look into all their IGL options before switching Twistzz because he has just been so good for them. And there's also, of course, the memes that have come out after this. For example, the retreat that Liquid went on without even using PCs or whatever to get the team all on the same page. Biggest waste of time ever. I mean, listen, I honestly kind of think there's some truth to this. Like, I think team bonding is good, but going on a massive, like, a retreat or whatever for, like, days, don't know if it's necessary, but listen, you know, bit of fun. Obviously, this is very hindsight-oriented. If the team went really well, everyone would have looked at this and been like, damn, that's crazy. Also worth saying, Zeus coming out, and more memes here, because he comes out and says, I wish we could have done things differently, I wish you the best, cadiaN, it was a pleasure getting to know you. And then the memes come out of, dudes be like, I wish we could have made this team work. My brother in Christ, you made the roster. And listen, this is mostly a meme, and I think for the most part, you obviously aren't going to know how a roster's going to work out when you make it, okay? We all know that. But as with any good joke, as with any good meme, there is an element of truth to it. And I think the element of truth is Zeus's job on this team probably had to be making sure that the players bought into cadiaN's system. And I don't think that really happened. And I think it's worth talking about, looking at this Liquid lineup and why it maybe didn't work. Because a lot of people were very excited about this team and thought that it could have been a genuine top team in the world contender. They never really got close to that. In fact, they never really got close to previous iterations of this roster. And I think you look at the lineup, cadiaN as a player, okay, yes, his AWPing was nowhere near as good as it has been in the past, so that is worth considering. But I think the main factor here is that, listen, Yekindar, I think, can work in a cadiaN system. He's willing to play aggressive, willing to play very active. Naf is, in hindsight, someone we should have looked at and say, okay, he is very defined in his role and always has been. Even when he left Liquid for a little bit and was on Renegades, this is ages ago, he would play a pretty similar way and have a pretty similar play style, just in a slightly more star role type of way. He's always going to want to be someone who lurks, who is that sort of player, who loves to just play by himself, and that's his biggest strength. So I understand why he doesn't want to change that. He's played this way for so long that it almost feels like he would have to play that way. But at the same time, I don't think it works with cadiaN. Because you look at someone like Shush, who he had before, hooxi was so much more willing as an anchor, for example, to just be like a team player. And I'm not saying Naf's not a team player, because I think how he plays is winning CS, and how he plays is very productive. But it's not ever going to be a way that is productive within a cadiaN system, if that makes sense. It's going to be a way that's productive on a different team. He's a very good player, don't get me wrong, but we maybe should have seen that there could have been some issues there. Then you have the fact that Skulls was just probably not quite good enough for this level of play, and we'll see. Apparently there are rumors that he is potentially going to be out of Liquid as well. We'll see in the future. And then I think the big one is Twistzz, because if Skulls played pretty well and cadiaN played a bit better, everything could be different if Twistzz was willing to play the cadiaN style. But the problem is, why would Twistzz do that when the whole reason he joined Liquid and left FaZe, remember, left FaZe, the whole reason he did that was to be more of a star player on this team. That was a big part of it. And so he is another player alongside Naf, your two best players, who have very defined ways they want to play the game. And it is so hard to say to Twistzz, I know you've just left FaZe because you want a bit more freedom and you want to be more of a star here, but how about you just throw that all away and become more of a pack player for us and become more like you were on FaZe? Bro, you can't say that to him. I mean, you could try, but I don't blame Twistzz for saying no. And so, in a weird way, in hindsight, it kind of makes sense why this roster would not work out. But at the time, it looked like it could have been so good. You look at the overall issues, I think the T side was obviously just a huge issue with this team. There were a lot of mistakes being made, but more importantly, so many rounds where your Kindar is just going in completely by himself, which is just not the way that Heroic in the past with cadiaN would play. And you can see here, just on T side, these are the numbers. Naf and Twistzz are the only players above a 1 rating. They are so far above everyone else. They are two players that are above their target rating. Twistzz, weirdly, it says has got the lowest target rating based on these roles. I mean, some of them are supportive, but some of them are like more roamy and middle roles where I'd have thought he'd be able to do all right. But either way, that is what the average of players that play those positions are meant to get. And yes, he is exceeding them alongside Naf. But then your Kindar, way below expectations. Skulls as well. I think Skulls just clearly either wasn't ready or just, I don't know, he looked a bit lost at times. And I think that sort of slowly happened as the team went on and it became clear it just wasn't working. It's really hard for a player to make the step up to tier 1 in a team that's having so many changes and seems to have become dysfunctional. And then cadiaN, I mean, his T-side numbers were just bad. For an AWPer, 0.91. I know you want to do more of your work on CT side as an AWPer, but yeah, that's that is rough. That is rough to be the lowest rated on T side for your team. CT side, weirdly, wasn't as bad. Twistzz gets a lot of pretty good roles, and yes, did well in them. Same as Naf. cadiaN was okay, actually, on CT side. Considering Liquid didn't win all that much, these are actually pretty good CT numbers across the board. I still think when you watch them play, Skulls would sometimes look like he's playing a little too safe and not always making plays. The CT side was obviously better, but I think in general, if you're a team that is not working well, it is easier to, not accidentally, but just kind of put together a CT side. There's less you have to figure out there. You know, you can kind of play off of instinct a little more and just feel between the players. And so now, the real question is, what does this mean for cadiaN? Because coming into CS2, I actually think it is a tragedy that that heroic roster from the past did not come through into CS2. Because they literally played in a way that would have been perfect for CS2, with teams playing more actively, with teams playing more aggressively. Heroic literally made that a style. That was their thing. It is one of the greatest tragedies. Okay, maybe that's a bit extreme. I don't know if I can say it's one of the greatest tragedies of Counter-Strike history, but it's a real shame in my opinion. And so now we have to look down the list at the other rosters and see where could cadiaN possibly end up. The first question is, does he ever change to rifling? Because his AWPing hasn't been that good. Maybe, but I think he seems like he's wanted to AWP his whole career. think his rifling could be... I don't even know if it would be an okay level. Like, I think he would be probably a pretty poor fragger as a rifler, at least initially. By the way, of course, an HLTV thread pops up saying minus device plus cadiaN. For the love of God, no. But we go down the list. A lot of these top teams definitely not interested in changing until we get to G2. Now, G2 very well might want to get rid of hooxi. They definitely don't want to get rid of m0NESY. They've already got rid of Nexa, which we'll talk about later. But even if cadiaN was willing to switch to rifling, I think G2 would be a pretty terrible fit for cadiaN. Because the one thing we seem to have learned from Liquid is that he needs players who are going to play within his system. And I don't think these are those players. Even just in general, I don't know if these players would not respect cadiaN, but would they listen to the way he wants to play? I don't think so. I don't think you're going to say to NiKo and m0NESY, you need to play more within my system and sacrifice some of your own individual plays. I just think this would be such a disaster if cadiaN joined G2. So I don't think this is a move that makes much sense. If anything, I would just stick with hooxi over cadiaN right now. Because I do think those players need to have the comfort and the freedom that they want. You go down VP, Astralis, no. Complexity. In theory, there's like some chance that I would say that this is a move that could happen, but I actually kind of think it doesn't make sense, especially since they've just now re-signed hooxi. I really actually rate JT as an in-game leader, and his fragging has been way better. So, yeah, I think if Complexity were going to make a move, right now it would probably be floppy, unfortunately. But I think now is not a good time to be making a move if you're Complexity. Heroic? Don't think so, honestly. They seem happy with cadiaN. They spent a lot on him. Liquid? Obviously not. Mongols, A9Z, Eternal Fire, Falcons. I just don't think any of these teams make sense. So the first team I would realistically say on the rankings that could maybe make this move is Big. I think there's a chance. They are a team who have changed from German to English speaking before, and in general, I'm not going to lie, when I talk to Germans, their English is, for the most part, fantastic. Genuinely very good. I think the thing that makes this interesting is that cadiaN has been playing pretty badly as the AWPer of Big. Has been playing pretty badly. He did a little better at the recent Yala Compass, where the team actually performed badly and he had an okay rating. There was a little uptick towards the end of the season, but still not that good. And the other interesting thing is, some of you guys might not know this if you're newer to Counter-Strike. In the past, twistzz has been an incredible player. He's never hit the top 20, which is sad because he stayed on Big his whole career. But this is a guy that FaZe were interested in. More as a potential in-game leader as well. But like back in the day, some of these numbers from twistzz, you're going to be shocked by if you haven't seen this guy back in 2019 days, 2018. He was genuinely a very good star player back in these days. Maybe even back to 2017. The question is, could he get back to that level? Could you bring in cadiaN for cadiaN and say, twistzz, you do more fragging and make this team work? Sadly, I don't think twistzz is that player anymore. And it's a real shame because twistzz will go down as one of the most underrated players in Counter-Strike history because he stayed with Big. And I respect him for it. If you don't know, twistzz stayed with Big because he wanted the German scene to do well. And we've seen that Big are willing to take one or two players from other countries. They've had Xantares before, so I think they would be open to cadiaN. But I think, sadly, twistzz prime has passed as a player. And so I still think you'd be left with a little lackluster firepower if you brought cadiaN in. But it is the sort of team where I think they would be willing to listen to cadiaN, and that could be interesting. And I actually think that the clash of styles there could work. So that's one that will consider him. NIP, not really sure. I feel like they've made moves recently enough that they're just seeing what works, and Alex is finally getting a chance with a roster that looks like it's actually doing okay. Bet Boom, no. Furia, no. FlyQuest, I highly doubt it, but maybe. I just don't think the firepower's there. MIBR, no. M80, no. I think Sin is actually very solid. Fnatic. Now, this is the one most people are looking at, and I can see why, but I can still see potential problems. So, Afro hasn't been that great as the AWPer of this team. Body, as an in-game leader, not a great fragger actually either. So I think if you were to make moves, on Fnatic to bring in cadiaN, you would get rid of Afro, bring cadiaN in, and then get rid of probably one of Body or Crims. You would probably, I guess, get rid of Body, but the problem is, I do look at this team and think to myself, are we not going to have some of the same problems? glhf is kind of like a NAF in some ways, except maybe even less willing to play for the team. Crims, I don't know if I see him playing in the cadiaN system either. Mattis definitely can, and he's a real talent as a young player. But I really don't know if I see it. Is this not just going down the same problem we just had, where I kind of feel like glhf is so focused on the way he wants to play? The real question is, you'd have to ask glhf himself, if cadiaN comes in as in-game leader, are you willing to change your game? That is the big question, but I don't know if we know the answer to that. So, I don't know if I actually like the Fnatic option. But it doesn't seem like there are many other options, so maybe he has to. I mean, you look down to Gamer Legion. I don't think so. I think the Slang guy's pretty good. Maybe if he changes to Rifle, but can Snacks become a star again? He's the one leading. I don't know. He's doing a good job as a fragging in-game leader. And I just kind of think Gamer Legion are seeing which of these young players are going to be their future for now. I think they're happy with what they're doing. The other options, okay, are the Danish teams. Not Astralis, not Falcons, not for me. I don't think that happens. It's the ones below. Now, Sashi is an interesting one. Firstly, because you've got a guy called Cabby, who almost sounds like Yabi, so it's a good start already. But secondly, they're actually coached by Hunden. That's an interesting one, isn't it? The Hunden cadiaN redemption arc. Could it happen? Well, they're a team that have been on the rise recently. I think they have some players, but at the same time, Lucky is one of the better players on this roster as the AWPer. I think it's Iceberg leading, so you'd get rid of him, I guess, and then I don't even know how that would work. They've been a team more on the rise recently, but I think the one that would make more sense in Denmark right now is actually Game and Gladiators. These guys under Ecstatic have actually been really good earlier in this year. They peaked at number 17 in the world back in April. That's not bad. That's really not bad. And listen, I'm no expert on the Danish scene at this level, but when I've seen Game and Gladiators play, I actually feel like they play a bit like old Heroic from what I've seen. The most out of any of these teams I've talked about so far. They felt like a team that very much play by committee. They don't have a clear star. They would definitely all be willing to listen to cadiaN, I'm sure. I think Crown's actually a pretty good player. Salazar as the AWPer, actually not that great, so you could just get rid of him. But the problem is, I really think the best solution is you'd want a mix of these two teams. I think maybe the best 4 players out of these two teams could go on a team with cadiaN and be decent. But even then, what do I think the peak is? Like, maybe you crack into the top 10 if you have a crazy good run, but I don't think it will be consistently. I don't know if cadiaN wants to be at that level, considering where he's been in the past. The other thing is, these options feel like they will always be here. I think cadiaN, even if he moves to another team and doesn't do that well, I think he'll always have the option to join that third best Danish team that's out there. And at that point, it could make some sense. But you probably have some options up here that you have to be willing to look at. If I was going to pick one, the thing is, Fnatic feels like it might end up being the most natural fit, even though they've recently made moves. But I can't get over the fact that if you have glhf and Crims on that roster, I just don't see them as cadiaN players. I just don't. I think they're too defined in how they want to play and how they want to lock things down. Maybe Crims could be a little more willing to change than I think, but I don't know. The big one is kind of interesting to me, but I just don't know if it will realistically happen. But for cadiaN, someone who can be good in the future, I think that is interesting. The other side of the coin, before we wrap up, is talking about Liquid. It seems like Skulls is going to be on the way out. It seems like Zeus might be as well. I don't know how I feel about the Zeus removal. I know a lot of people have been really hating on Zeus because he was on Fluxo, which was a team that looked like they played bad Counter-Strike. But I think Zeus has had such success in the past with top teams. And I think that coaching top teams is so different to coaching lower level teams. When you're coaching lower level teams, you are teaching these players a lot of the times the basics. So maybe Zeus isn't good at that, but it seems like in the past he's been good at being the glue guy and helping out the top teams and giving them that extra edge. But it does seem like those are the changes, and more importantly, who the hell will IGL? I don't want it to be Twistzz. I really don't. I know that everyone's getting horny because Device has just changed to IGL and they're like, oh, hello, a star IGL. But firstly, if you watch my Astralis video, I think there are a couple of reasons why that could still go badly in the future, right? I think there is a chance that once Astralis take a bit of a dip and once they get past this early period, the stress and the constant work ethic could be difficult, and even just staying composed in big moments, it could be tricky. So I don't think that's a guarantee to continue working. And secondly, it's just such a risk, man. When you're this good, when you've got players this good, why take the risk? What if you never get back to that peak, right? Your Kindar should be sitting there telling Twistzz, listen, buddy, be careful. Be very careful, okay? You might just want to stay doing what you're doing. So I think for Liquid, the options are kind of tight. I mean, I think it seems like Nitro's coming back to CS. Listen, I'd just be so sick of that if he came back to Liquid. Like, are we just going to rotate Nitro and once every year or two randomly for a little bit? And then, like, it doesn't seem like he's that committed, does it? So, I don't know. I think we're past Nitro at this point. I didn't mind them bringing him back last time, but kind of feels like at this point, bringing him back again, it's like, what are we doing? I don't know if that's a long-term solution. It's kind of hard to find the options, but if I were them, I would genuinely be looking at Sin on M80. I think he's a really solid IGL. He's put this team together. I think M80 is a very well-crafted roster. We know there's rumors that G2 are interested in Morbs, who has come up under Sin on this team. And yeah, I really think Sin can put together a very solid system, and he's already in an A. He might be pricey, but he is already in an A. Other than that, I don't know, man. Like, I think you are going to have to go for a risk on a lower level in-game leader like someone like Sin. And I think Sin is probably the best option out of those. But tough times for Liquid. I was going to do the Nexa one in this part as well, but I think I'm going to save that for tomorrow because I've talked so long about Liquid. Very interesting. I hope to see cadiaN back on a good team. I absolutely think he can still be a very good in-game leader in CS2. And I think his AWPing would improve if he was on a good team, because your stats naturally improve, and just in general, he's going to get it more often if they're winning. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. Very interesting one all round. Roster Mania is here, baby. Let's go. And I'll catch you tomorrow for that Nexa one.